Sweet. We're on?
We are.
Okay.
I will share the screen.
Where are we going first? Okay.
Just,
That's just a little different.
yes, because I changed it. Only a few
And what are we doing second?
the agenda. You want to just tell everybody hello?
Yeah, hi everybody. Welcome welcome to our newest, we'll call it the PPP webinar series that we've been doing. We haven't had one for a couple of weeks. Quite honestly, there hasn't been a whole lot going on for a couple of weeks, and now all of a sudden the activity's starting to pick up again. Reason is Congress will recess next Friday until after Labor Day. So there's a lot of issues that have to be addressed now, and many of those issues concern PPP. We have about 300 people on the webinar today, so we're going to give a couple minutes so everybody can get on, and then we'll get started. Today's program is going to focus on two specific issues that we want everybody to be aware of. One of the most misunderstood pieces of the PPP program after we get through the forgiveness is what happens tax-wise once we have our PPP loan forgiven. And there's been a lot of debate in Congress. Actually, the president joined in on the debate. There's been fights between the Treasury Department and Congress itself about the taxation of these forgiven loans. So we're going to deal with that today. We have a couple of examples of how people are going to get hurt here if the rules aren't changed, and changed pretty quickly. The other thing is that we have a round two coming up. It's a House bill that's still being worked on right now. It hasn't been passed by anybody yet, but it will all have to happen before August 7th, next Friday, or August 8th, because that's when they recess. So there's going to be a lot of activity in the next 10 days about getting this bill passed. It's already designed. It's already been debated in the House. So it has to move from the House to the Senate to get passed, signed by the Senate, and it has to be signed by the President. And there are some issues in the bill itself that the President doesn't agree with. So the whole bill being passed, and it's a piece of a bill coming through. So there's a large bill that gets passed by the President, and he has some issues with tax credits and payroll tax credits and things that he needs to get worked out first. So there's no guarantee that this is going to get passed, but something's going to happen before next Friday. Yeah, so I have my disclaimer, or our disclaimer. Let me introduce ourselves first, I guess. I'm Bob Simpson. I'm the managing partner of Brinker Simpson, and we're a regional CPA firm outside of Philadelphia. We've been in business for 30 years, and our client base is generally small business owners that have revenue up to 100 million, and individual tax clients as well. We have a tax department, an audit, and a test department. We do forensics, litigation support, and fraud investigations, and we have an outsourced department as well. I'm with Kristen McCabe, and Kristen leads our COVID-19 response team. Sounds like we've been in business for a long time, but it's only been a couple of months, actually, when you think about these things. So Kristen has helped us through putting all the information together and presenting it in a way that hopefully is understandable by the people that are on the webinar. I've been on a lot of other webinars, and we try not to get too technical the way we're explaining things, and we're also sharing some real life experiences that our clients are having. We did get, as a firm, we got a PPP loan, and we're at the point where we can put our applications in for forgiveness. We have spent all the money. We were not an 8-week program, so we're going to be between 8 and 24 weeks when we do our application. We haven't applied for forgiveness yet, but we can. Those are the things. The disclaimer is, did I already do that? I already covered the disclaimer? All right, go back to the disclaimer. You can. We're not giving out any advice, we hope. And we're asking you to make sure that you do check with your accounting and tax professionals to make sure your specific situations are addressed appropriately. When we get into the tax planning issues today, they're going to be different for everybody, but we're going to show a little bit of examples of how the taxes will impact the business owners. Typically, we talk for about 30 minutes and then we'll answer questions. Please,
please use the Q&A, not the
Q&A.
chat. And anybody that was registered as of around 11 o'clock today, I sent the slides to you in advance. If you don't get them, or just send me an email and we'll also post them to brinkersimpsoncares.com.
All right, so
This is the agenda.
here's our agenda. Talk about the PPP program. We've kind of beaten that to death, I guess. If you're not familiar with the program, then you probably shouldn't be on this call. You should be learning about the program first, but I will tell you that the PPP program is a forgivable loan program, the first of its kind, issued by the Treasury and the SBA and supported by the federal government. And it allows banks to lend money to their customers based on a formula of payroll from the prior year. If you spend the money in certain areas, which we'll go over quickly, you can have that loan forgiven, no payback. If you don't, and you violate the spending, I don't know if everybody's read about the guy who bought the Lamborghini with his PPP money. He has to pay the money back, but he gets to do it over a 5-year period at a 1% interest rate. So he's got a Lamborghini at 1% interest. I'm sure that there's going to be other repercussions to him. But we've always professed that spend the money in the areas where it needs to be spent to get the money forgiven. This was not designed to be a 1% loan program for anybody. It was designed to restore payroll. It wasn't designed to save your companies. It was designed simply to restore payroll, to keep your employees off the unemployment rolls while your business was suffering, it was closed, it was ramping back up. And of course, the federal government comes along in the middle of that and plugs in a $600 per week unemployment bonus for employees. So many employees figured out it was better to stay on unemployment than it was to have to go back to work because it simply made more money on unemployment. The new stimulus program that's coming out in this 10-day period as well is addressing the unemployment, federal unemployment, which runs out this Friday. And there will be a continuation of that plan, but it won't be at the $600 level. It'll be between $200 and $500 per week based on certain criteria that you have to hit. We're not going to discuss that today. We're simply going to talk about the PPP program. In some of our other webinars, you may have heard about the Main Street Lending Program, which is a separate SBA program outside of PPP. It creates an availability for companies to borrow money at lower rates without the total scrutiny of a loan through SBA and through their bank. We're not going to talk about that today either. If you have questions on that, please send that to us. It's been rolled out. It hasn't been accepted as a lot of people hoped it would be. It's very complicated. So you've got your money a long time ago now, and now you've got it. You're ready to get forgiven because you have spent the money on payroll and other costs. Make sure I got it. Okay.
So there's just a history lesson that was up there.
Yes.
That's while Bob was talking. These are just some milestones that have happened with the program since it started, just information, and then the PPPFA, if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, so June the 5th was the last legislation that really came out, and that was the PPP Flexibility Act. So PPPFA, and it changed a couple of things significantly. First, took the 8-week period and moved it to a possible 24-week period or December 31st to spend your money. So for a lot of companies that were struggling to get the payroll all fit in an 8-week period, that struggle is over. You can spread that out over the 24-week period. And since your payroll was based on 10 weeks in order to qualify for the loan, you have up to 24 weeks to spend. So that brought in a tremendous amount of relief for forgiveness for those companies that were struggling there. It also reduced the payroll spend that had to be 75% of the loan proceeds, reduced it down to 60%. So you had an opportunity, if you weren't able to restore all of your payroll at that point, you still had an opportunity to spend 60%, but you're over 24-week period now, so you have a much longer time to do it. It changed some of the rules on the loans, but those were the most significant changes that came out of the Flexibility Act. And now we're into the forgiveness period. So you'll see here are the forgiveness rules, and these have not been changed yet. There are a couple of changes that are coming up in forgiveness, and there's a couple of things we want to discuss about forgiveness and when you should apply, how you should apply, items like that, which we'll get into. So all of these slides have been sent out to everybody, and we have them on our website as well. Let's talk a little bit about compensation limits for owners and what they can get forgiven. So there's 4 categories here. The first is sole proprietors and Schedule C and F filers. If you're going to use an 8-week period for forgiveness, then you're limited to $15,385 for the maximum amount of forgiveness. If you go to the 8-week, if you go beyond the 8-week period, you can go up to $20,833 for forgiveness. So if you're a sole proprietor who makes $100,000 in 2019, and your wife also is a sole proprietor who makes, or your spouse, I should say, it makes $100,000, you can get $42,000 of forgivable loan money. And when we talk about the taxation a little bit for proprietors that are just using the money to pay themselves, that money would be could be, we're going to use the word could, completely tax-free. So no tax repercussion on that at all. We did have a couple of clients who were in this situation who just got the PPP loans from a bank in the area that's still accepting applications. So you know that the date of the PPP application closes down August 8th, next Friday, I guess. This is all about next Friday. Banks are closing the application process this Friday. So if you have not applied for PPP yet and you qualify, you need to get that application in by this Friday. Go to your bank first, and if your bank says, I'm not accepting any more applications, which many banks in the Philadelphia area have said, contact us, because we do know banks that are still accepting applications. But I tell you, they got to be clean, they got to be ready to go. They're not going to wait for paperwork, and you got to get it done, in the next 3 days. So that's sole proprietor. C Corp owners, you can look at the 2 8 weeks or after longer than 8 weeks for forgiveness. C Corp owners who are taking payroll are still limited to the $15,385, but you get health insurance and you get retirement costs added into forgiveness period. S Corp owners can move their payroll forgiveness up to $20,833, plus your retirement benefits are eligible for forgiveness, but your health care is not. And then general partners in a partnership or an LLC that's a partnership, you can get forgiveness up to $20,833 per person, but you don't have your health insurance as part of that forgiveness piece. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about tax-wise is if you're a partner, right now, maybe we should just move into that. Yeah, let's just we'll stay on task. How's that? Which we never do.
I'll try.
We'll try to do that today. So forgiveness, when to apply. And the advice we're giving people is no rush. Analyze, but wait. So after you spend all of your PPP money, assuming you've spent it correctly, then you look at forgiveness. There is no rush to get that in. When you apply to the bank, you're going to apply to your bank for forgiveness. The bank is going to scrutinize your application and analyze your application to make sure it meets all the forgiveness rules. And then it's going to submit that application to SBA with the recommendation to have the forgiveness done. SBA can further scrutinize the application, or it can accept that recommendation. So the banks are the middle people here, and this is Love Your Bank quarter. Yeah, year. We're almost at Love Your Banker year now.
Yep.
So when you go to apply for forgiveness with your bank, make sure that that application is neat and tight and has everything in there so that your bank can kind of tick and lick and move it along. This is going to be a flood of forgiveness applications. Most of them are to come in the fall when this 24-week period is used up. So most of those applications are going to come this fall. So your banks are going to get inundated with these applications. One of the, you see at the last bullet point here, this new legislation that's coming out will contain a provision in there that asks that all loans at $150,000 or below, which I think is 80-some% of the loans written, will be automatically forgiven without support documentation. And the borrower will only have to fill out a brief affidavit stating that they did use the money for the intended purposes and they did follow the rules of the PPP. And that affidavit will be enough for them to get forgiveness, and those loans will be automatically forgiven. So if you're if you've got a loan less than 150, you want to not do anything right now. Just sit back. Don't even work up the application for forgiveness. Don't worry. Don't waste your time with the numbers. Sit back, see what happens in the next 10 days, and in all likelihood, that loan will be automatically forgiven. And there has been some talk that that 150 number could be pushed up to a higher level as well. This will give the banks a tremendous amount of relief, and it will also give small businesses time to build their business instead of time filling out a lot of paperwork. So the deadline, so what happens is you submit your application. Your bank has 60 days to submit that application to SBA. So in that 60-day period, the bank can come back to you with questions, can scrutinize your application. The bank is not the one that grants the forgiveness. It's the SBA that will grant the forgiveness, SBA and the Treasury Department. So the bank submits the application to the SBA. The SBA has, how many days? 60 days?
I think it's 60 days.
60 days to scrutinize that, or maybe 30 days. And then they come back and they tell the bank that that loan has been forgiven. The bank will then notify you, the borrower, that the loan's been forgiven. If for any reason your loan is not forgiven, in part or in total for some reason, once you receive notification about the forgiveness or lack of, you have 30 days to appeal that decision to the SBA through your bank. So a lot of timing is going to happen here as we move out of the summer and into the fall. Tax planning considerations we're going to talk about here because they're significant. Watch your payroll restoration. If you are reducing salaries of employees at 75%, if you're reducing it more than 25%, you have some criteria that you have to hit over that 24-week period, or you could get a reduction in the forgiveness amount.
You can test your FTE at the time of application if it's before 24 weeks, but the salary piece has to go all the way through the 24 regardless of when you apply.
Right. So you have to restore payroll. If you're fighting that restoration, you've got it. If you're going to wait 24 weeks to apply, and you can apply any time between 8 and 24 weeks. You don't have to wait until the end. But the way the rules are changing now, there's going to be a lot that happens in the next 10 days. And then after that, there won't be anything that happens for the next 30 days. So watch what happens then, and then we can make decisions as to whether we want to apply for forgiveness or not. So watch your salary restoration. I mean, the SBA and the Treasury gave enough relief to maintaining or restoring a head count with all the changes that were made in the Flexibility Act and some of the changes that were made before that you shouldn't have any reason why you can't hit the restore the head count to some level, to the level that gets 100% forgiveness on that. That was great moves by the Federal Reserve or by the Treasury and by the SBA. The other thing is that one of the things you want to keep an eye out for is timing of your payroll and timing of paying your expenses. Since you've been extended out over this 24-week period, one of the things in the Flexibility Act was if you were staying within the 8-week period, you could pay payroll and cost outside of that period as long as they were on the next scheduled pay date. But those things probably don't have to be a concern any farther going into this. So our advice is sit tight right now on forgiveness. There's no reason to rush anything. Rules are changing again. And there's a second PPP program that's going to come out that we're going to talk about today, that if you got the first PPP loan, you're still eligible for the second loan. The criteria is much tougher, and it is going to go to companies that have certainly been hit economically, and you have to prove the economic hardship. Not like the first one where you just had to attest that you have economic uncertainties, and that's why you apply, and that's why you would get a PPP loan. So some changes coming out to keep an eye on. Let's talk about taxes. And
I'm sorry, it's
I'm upside down.
This one.
Okay.
Is it in there? Here, you want that? That's the
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Add water.
Yeah. So continuing Small Business Recovery and Paycheck Protection Program Act. This is something that was just introduced yesterday. This is the new program that's coming down. So what the new program will do is bring a second round of PPP money that will be forgivable, again, with certain criteria met. The forgiveness in this second loan is much easier than the first. However, the qualifications to get the loan are much tougher than in the first loan. So this is new money coming out. It's going to be limited to companies that can prove a 50% reduction in their gross receipts, either in the first quarter of 2020 versus the first quarter of 2019, or the second quarter of 2020 versus the second quarter of 2019. So there's two measurement periods. As we read this right now, and I'm sure it will be adjusted a little bit, doesn't make it easy for anybody here for sure. So there's two measurements to be made. And let's assume that your business fell off from April 1st through June 30th, the second quarter of 2020. You take your gross receipts, all right? They're not saying gross sales, they're not saying gross revenue, they're saying gross receipts, which is collections, compared to your gross receipts from the same period of 2019. And if your 2020 results are 50% or less of the 2019 results, then you qualify for the loan. That just gets you in the door. You have to have less than 300 employees in this one. The other one was 500 employees, and you can't exceed $2 million in the loans. If you remember, the SBA, the Treasury Department, said they were going to examine all loans over $2 million. So they've run this down to a $2 million cap, which would hopefully get it away from their scrutiny. And then if you have any other SBA lending within the last 90 days, you can't exceed $10 million in total loans. I think most of the people on the call here will be less than $2 million for sure. So entities are similar to what the entities were before. However, some not-for-profits are loaded into this for eligible lending, borrowing. If you're a 501c6, you become eligible in this program. You weren't in the prior program. Veterans organizations, tribal businesses, self-employeds, and independent contractors are all part of the second program as they are in the first program. The calculation of the loan will be similar to the prior calculation. It was 2.5 months of average payroll. From 2019, we used as the prior period measurement. It looks like this loan period is saying from the last 12 months. So if you're going from April to June, you're probably going to have to measure the payroll through 12 months through March 31st, although we're not sure of that. Again, as part of the program here, you'll see that borrowers that have a loan less than 150 will not be required to submit an application. Simply attest that they were good and they did the right thing. You'll have a covered period that's going to start when the loan funds are dispersed up through December 31st. So there'll be a lot of flexibility in the period you select. And the biggest items are the last bullet point, expanding non-payroll costs to allow for generally operating expenses. I'm glad they threw accounting in there. But they're going to allow many more operating expenses to be forgiven as part of the 40% forgiveness. 60% still goes to payroll, but as part of the 40%, you'll have more flexibility and you'll have more coverage. The deductibility of these expenses has not been addressed in this program, but we believe that it will follow the deductibility that's in the first program. That simply says is that if you use your PPP money and it's forgiven, the expenses that you paid with that money are not deductible from a tax standpoint. So this is what we're going to talk about now. Be very careful with the explanation of that, and please do connect with your accounting and tax people to make sure that you're covered on this. So simply what the rules say now, and this is an IRS Treasury Department rule that hasn't been changed. Any expenses you use, that would use your PPP money to pay expenses. The PPP forgiveness loan is not taxable. However, the expenses that you pay that would normally be tax deductible are not tax deductible. Let's talk about a sole proprietor who has no payroll. It simply gets the $20,833 loan based on their $100,000 net income. They're going to use that money to pay themselves, nothing else. They can get total forgiveness of the $20,833. That's the maximum amount that can get forgiven. Since paying yourself as a sole proprietor is not a tax deduction anyway, there would be no taxability of those proceeds. So if you're in a sole proprietor situation, or if you're in a general partner situation, an LLC partner, an LLC member, you would not have any taxation on the amount of money that was paid for your payroll. We have 5 partners in our firm, so we have $103,000 of expenses that would be paid for partner payroll. So we go to do our taxation on the forgiveness piece. That $103,000 would not be considered taxable as the rules are written today. The rest of our loan would be taxable in the way that the expenses would not be deductible. A lot of questions come along with that. However, so right now, if you're a corporation and you've got a $1 million PPP loan and you're in the highest tax bracket and your PPP loan gets forgiven totally, you're looking at a potential of a $400,000 tax hit. So you have to be prepared for that. Now, the way that would happen is that your business sustained itself without the PPP, so you should have the cash in order to pay the taxes that are a part of that. However, those taxes might not be due until next April, let's say. So you have set aside your cash to pay taxes, but your business takes a downturn in January, February, March of next year. And you use that money to pay those expenses for next year. You still face that taxation piece for this year. This is a big problem that people have to plan ahead for. So you can always pay your taxes ahead of time, although nobody seems to ever want to do that, nor do I ever recommend it. But that's something that you're going to have to plan for, is that tax money, as the rules are written today, has to be due. Now, there's a groundswell of support within Congress to eliminate that rule. It would take an act of Congress to do that. It's just a Treasury Department rule. Treasury Department is not going to change the rule. The IRS is enforcing the rule. And the rule states that any expenses paid with tax-free money are not deductible. Certain members of Congress want to change that rule because the intent of this program was not to burden people with taxes, nor was the intent of the program to get 40% of the money lent back in tax revenue. President Trump supports Congress efforts to have this rule changed. The only way rules get changed is by pressure. And American Institute of CPAs, my governing body, has put a lot of pressure on Congress to get this rule changed. And if you're in any kind of organizations, you should lobby your organization as well to try to get a change in this rule, because this is a huge impact on a lot of people. It's a difference between getting 100% of your money or 60% of your money. And let's face it, you were given this money to spend. You were not given this money to pay taxes. So that's a big issue. We have a little example that's up on the screen right now of a certain client of ours who goes through this program, and I will walk you through it real quickly. So this is a 2020 profit and loss for our client before forgiveness and after forgiveness. And you'll see the bottom line, taxable income is $183,000 before forgiveness, and they got a $352,000 loan. Yeah, 352. You'll see the line item there under gross profit, PPP forgiveness, 352. So they get their whole loan forgiven, and it adds 352 to their bottom line. That $352,000 costs this taxpayer $120,000 in taxes. You look at column 1, no forgiveness, and you look at column 2, forgiveness adjustment. So they go from paying taxes of 110 to paying taxes of 230. So they have to give back 120,000 of the 352 that they received. This opens up the opportunity to do some aggressive tax planning for 2020. Very important to make sure you're on top of certain rule changes that can be taken advantage of in 2020 to make sure that this added income gets protected in some way. Clients of ours are buying equipment. They're making other moves as far as investment strategies to try to knock this tax number down. One of the other things they're doing, which you have an example of it there, is qualified investment property that may not have been, or qualified improvement property, leasehold improvements we'll call it, that may not have been depreciated or have been depreciated under old tax laws where you had to write it off over a long period of time. Those rules were changed in 2018 and affect the 2019 and 2020 going forward that allow you to write.
The CARES Act, it added new category of it. So you can use that new thing to go backwards.
Right. In the CARES Act was the ability to deduct aggressive depreciation on qualified improvement property. And if you haven't done it, this would be a good year to do it since this PPP money might be pushing you into a higher tax bracket. If you're already in the top tax bracket of 37% and you pop on another 300,000 of income on top of that, that income will be taxed straight through at 37%. We don't know how the states are going to tax this income yet. No rulings have come out yet, but I would anticipate many states, Pennsylvania is not one of them, but many states follow the federal tax return. So you would expect that those states would tax this income just as the federal are doing it. So if you're in New York, for instance, and your tax rate might be 12%, you're looking at 37% federal tax plus 12% New York tax. So you're getting up there, giving half this money back in taxes. So this is an area that we're asking people to really pay attention to and be aware. Don't argue with us. People are arguing with us that it's not taxable. And we're fighting back. We're fighting with our clients over them telling us what's taxable and what's not taxable, which is kind of strange. But as it sits right now, this income could be fully taxable to certain companies that have got PPP forgiveness and are at certain levels. Look, this PPP money was not lent to save your company. It was lent to pay your employees. If your company recovers in the back end of this year and recovers to the point where the year is equal to last year, let's say, then you're going to have an issue with this taxation of this money. So you would just please be aware.
And you want to make decisions before year end that you might be able to implement to make sure you're being the most advantageous decision making.
Yeah. So there are, we've listed a few items here that you may want to take a look at. So here's some summaries. Timing of the forgiveness application. Could you push it into 2021? If you file your application towards the end of the period there and it takes the 30 days, 60 days, when that money's forgiven, is that when it becomes taxable, or is it taxable at the point where you took the money?
It's a decision.
Yeah, it's at right now. It's written as of the decision, but since it could span tax years, that there's an opportunity there for some changes. Timing of estimated taxes that are due on this income. If this income is forgiven as of June 30th, let's say, technically you owe that money throughout the year. There are safe harbors for tax payment issues, but you got to be careful and make sure you make the safe harbor. The IRS has not offered any guidance so far on how to pay taxes on this money. The QBI deduction, for companies that have pass-through income, it could disqualify companies for QBI. If you're using this income to pay payroll and it's telling you to reduce your payroll costs because they're non-deductible, that could impact your qualified business income as well. So be very careful with your QBI pass-through and the QBI forgiveness percentage. You are able to make increased charitable deductions this year as part of the CARES Act. It took the limit off of cash deductions. So what would have been a 50% limit in prior years has now been removed for 1 year. So take a look at that as an opportunity. Fixed assets to consider the qualified improvement property write-off that we talked about earlier. And again, investment in equipment, there are very aggressive depreciation rules available for companies that make capital equipment purchases or capital leases this year. So that's something that you can look at, where you can get upfront depreciation deductions for equipment that you finance over a certain number of years. So there's opportunities to buy equipment, get depreciation deductions, save taxes, but not pay for the equipment on an ongoing basis.
And so the equipment piece, if you meet with your accountants and realize there's $250,000 of depreciation you can write off due to the CARES Act changes, maybe you don't want to buy the piece of equipment until next year. But if you do not have that, then maybe you would want to do it before year end. There's going to be a lot of situations that are really unique, considering RMDs next year, and everyone's going to have very unique circumstances that you really need to touch base with your accountant, especially if you're now experiencing a downturn, because the cash situation is going to be tricky.
Plus, there's a second round that's coming out that's based on the computation for the first round. If you're in that, we'll call it the 50% and below group, and you got a $500,000 loan for the first PPP, you'll qualify for a $500,000 loan on the second PPP, because the data to qualify is the same. So you could double your PPP money as long as you meet that receipts requirement. All right, so that's it for our talking. Here's our websites that we have set up for this, and many people have emailed us. So our website that we set up just for COVID-19 situations is www.brinkersimpsoncares.com. And we have a cares at brinkersimpson.com for emails. Please send the emails direct to there, and they'll get answered pretty quickly. We're not specialists on unemployment issues. We're not real specialists on the stimulus checks. So some of those questions might take a little longer to answer. And frankly, some of those questions we have to defer out to some other people, because we just simply don't know the answers. There's so much complication with unemployment right now that it's very tough to answer questions, because that seems to change. There are rent forgiveness programs in Pennsylvania. There are programs that pay your utility bills. There are local Delco Strong programs that give out grants to companies. We're not experts on any of those. We're not going to call ourselves experts in anything. So if you ask questions, we'll try to get back to you as best we can. We'll go to questions now. Remember to put your questions in the Q&A. Okay. So I'm still confused on FTEs. Do we need to meet a certain number on one day, the final day? Yes. The answer is yes. You got to meet a certain number of FTEs. Now, there's a lot of flexibility on FTEs. So if you had 50 employees in your measurement period from last year, this year you started with 50 employees, but 3 of them quit, 2 of them you got rid of with cause, 5 of them you laid off, and then you gave them a letter to come back and they refused to come back. If that's 10 people, then that 50 from the period where you measured gets reduced to 40. So you should be able to hit your FTE number, but the answer is yes, you got to restore it.
And then you have till 12/31 for certain situations too.
Yeah, okay. Some of these questions are going to have to delete. Duration of the webinar expected to be 1 hour, hopefully. We'll see. And we do record this, so afterwards you'll be able to have access to it if you don't have access to it. I got a PPP through Square. They have not yet issued the application for forgiveness. Do they have a deadline for providing that? I don't know the answer to that. The Square, which is a service that was providing PPP loans, they can't report anything back to SBA until the 10th of August. So I'm going to say that they haven't issued a forgiveness, because that forgiveness is going to change with this new passage that comes out. So just sit tight and wait for it. A lot of banks have issued a package of forgiveness, and some of the banks locally are it's a very complete package. But sit tight again with it because they are all going to change. And that forgiveness application is not the bank's program. That's the SBA's program, which you can get from anywhere. I mean, you can go to the SBA website and get the forgiveness package. You don't have to wait for your bank.
And some lenders are going to pull their portals down because if you apply through your bank and there's a reduction in forgiveness, and now you have a loan, and then Congress changes legislation to make it that you would have been completely forgiven, and they don't make it retroactive, the banks have a little bit of liability there, or think that they do. So Square will probably delay it for that reason.
Can you get the forgiveness to go to 500,000? Certainly. I'll call Donald today and tell him that to move it up. Question, with the new legislation or the new round of PPP, will the amount change? And the answer to that is no. The amount will be the same as it was in the old loan, the amount of qualification. So a self-employed person maximum that they would get for themselves is $20,833 if they were at $100,000 of profit in 2019. So the criteria is the same and the amounts are the same. If you are an independent contractor and got a PPP loan, can you also get unemployment? Yes. I have many people who were working last year. Remember, the PPP was based on last year's numbers. As a sole proprietor, you can collect both. For this one, yeah. So for a sole practitioner or legal firm, if one received PPP in May based on payroll, however, if the loan amount would have been greater based on net income, is there a mechanism to apply for the difference? Yes. So in this new PPP program is an opportunity for anybody to fix what was done incorrectly in the first PPP program. So you can, so we have a client who bought a company, merged a company, but only applied for a payroll based on their parent company, not the merger. However, they could have applied both at the time for both companies. So here they can go back and fix that in this program. So you have the 50% criteria, but you also have anybody who got a loan that needs a fix can go back in and do it. Now, can a PPP loan participant apply for forgiveness to any PPP lender, or it must be the lender that provided the loan? It's going to have to be the PPP. Well, your loan is with the bank, so you're going to have to apply to that bank for forgiveness.
You can see some get sold.
Yeah, now some of those banks sold their loans, like Bryn Mawr Trust in our area, sold their entire PPP portfolio to a new lending group. That lending group is connecting with all of the borrowers to let them know that the application goes to them. So in a situation where your loan was sold, you'd be at the new lender. Do you hear anything about the restaurant industry? Well, the loan, the new PPP loan with the 50% loss of business is directly targeted to the restaurants, the gyms, the hairdressers who were closed. So that's the purpose of this loan. It doesn't mention the restaurant business in the proposals, but that's why this loan's being written right now. That's all I hear about for the restaurant business.
Yeah. She's saying the same.
Yeah. They cannot bring everybody back as long as we're not allowed to open fully. Correct. So that's an issue. You had to offer people their jobs back, but if they turn that offer down, then they come off of your headcount restoration. The best I can give you in that, I know exactly what you're talking about. This new money that's coming out, 60% of it has to go to payroll. 40% of it can go to other expenses. There is no cure for what you're talking about now. Hopefully, all those people that you offered the job to turned it down. That's the relief that we want you to get. If a business has enough payroll to cover the full loan amount, does it look better to just list only payroll, or is it better to have a mix? You can put your forgiveness application in at any amount, I mean, if
If
you,
you actually want to do as much as you possibly can, because then when you have the reductions, at the way the math works now, if you put everything in there and there's reductions, you still potentially could get to 100%.
yeah, exactly. So if you put in 100% for payroll and the SBA comes back and knocks you down for any of those payroll reasons, you still have that ability of those 40% expenses to put in for forgiveness. So my recommendation would be, if it's all payroll, then put it in as all payroll. Is it likely that the second PPP will be forgiven? Yes. The whole purpose of the PPP is to grant forgivable loans. You still have to spend 60% on payroll and 40% on other costs. They're opening up the other cost piece to allow more expenses in there, which they should have done in the first round, but they didn't go back and change. Remember, there's still 33 questions that have been submitted to SBA and Treasury that haven't been answered yet. And those questions are still the same, like what's a utility, things of that nature. Can you deduct interest on personal property loans? So there's a lot of questions that they haven't addressed yet that are supposed to clarify the whole PPP program. We've been asking those questions since it first came out. They still promise that that 31 or 33 question thing is going to come out with answers to them. So we're hoping for that as well. The $150,000 forgiveness, is it for the new program or the old program or both? So it will be for the new program. Do we know if it's
No,
for the,
it's.
or I'm sorry, for the old program?
Yeah, it'll probably apply to both.
It'll probably be both, but it is addressed only on the old program. So if your loan was 150 and below, and this legislation gets passed, then that's kind of automatically forgiven once you fill out the affidavit. Now the new program, I would assume would follow suit.
And it isn't passed yet, just.
Right, it's not
It
passed.
just came out yesterday.
It should be hopefully soon. PPP was received and 100% was used for payroll. Employee who has been working and paid throughout the covered period has been recently exposed to COVID. He now will be tested and quarantined at home. He has used up the 2020 sick time and vacation already. Are you required to pay him for the time out?
Yes.
You want to expand a little bit on that, or?
So the first, before the CARES Act, was the FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Recovery Act, I think it's called. In that there were emergency sick time, basically emergency paid leave, that somebody exposed to COVID, somebody in their house was exposed to COVID and you can't come to work for that reason. If he can telework, then this does not apply. If he cannot telework and he has to stay home, the government will pay for up to 10 days, a maximum of $510 a day of their sick time while they're waiting for a result or quarantined or whatever. And it's all handled for your payroll company, and they pay it directly when we use it here, actually, at the firm.
Right, we did use it. We used this program because we had people who were quarantined because of fear or because of exposure, and they had some family situations. So you get tax credits for that against your payroll taxes for the amounts that you're paying them right through your payroll company. So check with your payroll service for that, and they'll be able to set that up for you.
And in that same one, there's the paid sick leave and the paid family leave.
Right.
So we've been using it if you don't have daycare or things like that, and it's 100% paid for through your tax deposits, payroll tax deposits.
Yeah, so be aware of that. Check with your payroll company. When can businesses apply for the second loan? So the second loan hasn't been passed yet. The legislation has not been passed. The likelihood is it will get passed by August 8th. It has to go to the Senate to be signed. The Senate said it will sign it. Hopefully by that point, Trump and the Senate have worked out all the kinks in the plan. So the 8th, let's say the 7th in the House, the 8th in the Senate, signed by Trump on the 9th, goes into effect by the 11th or 12th. The 11th's a great day. So either around the 11th or 12th, I would think the applications would be ready for that.
It's Bob's birthday,
Yes.
August 11th.
We advised not to include 2019 401k ER match typically paid in August if we don't need to. Agree. Use as much on payroll as possible, up to 100%. Okay. To me, that's okay. The 401k match is part of the payroll cost. So it's certainly allowable. I'm not sure why you were advised not to use that, but if your strategy gets forgiveness by using other costs, that's fine. And again, if you're not forgiven fully by the SBA, then maybe you go back and amend. But yeah, I don't know the answer why you would be determined not or recommended not to do that.
As long as you're careful about including any owner comp based on their entity type, there's no reason to not include that.
Does the first PPP loan amount received count as gross receipts for the second round? Wow, great question.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is no, and I'll tell you why. Because the PPP, as it sits right now for everybody, is a loan. It's not income, and that loan hasn't been forgiven yet. So right now it's a loan. It doesn't count towards the receipts. I'm sure that the definition of receipts is going to be bank deposits from customers for one period versus bank deposits the next period. There's a lot of flexibility in there, and people are already talking about ways to beat it, and let's hope not. Let's do it right. If a business did not make a total by 8 weeks and opted to do 24, but have now used all the funds, do they still have to wait for 24 weeks? No, you can stop at any time in between and do your forgiveness application. We are in that boat as well. We spent all our money. We've met the forgiveness. We just haven't put our application in because we're going to wait to see what happens with the changes that are coming out. And hopefully there's a whole lot of information that comes out in the next 10 days. After that period of time, we'll discuss whether to get the application in or not. I don't want my bank sitting on my application looking real closely at things. Not that there's anything to worry about, but I would rather have my application, I'm sorry to the bankers, I'd rather have my applications going in a pile with a lot of applications so they're pushing them through as fast as they can. That's just my personal preference here. Originally, we say get it in fast so it comes out fast. I kind of change your tune and say if they're not requiring me to file it now, I'll sit back and I'll wait a little bit until I get it filed. Is the comp still deductible? Yes. When you say the comp still deductible, I'm not sure. Jeffrey, send me an email on that and I'll answer you personally. Will the PPP money be recognized as income on the date of forgiveness or the date of receipt?
I think it's the forgiveness.
Yeah, forgiveness date, because up until the point of forgiveness, that loan is, or that money is still a loan. At that point, when you get forgiven, that money becomes non-deductible at that point. So I'm going to say the date of forgiveness. Will the second PPP be the same amount as the first PPP? The computation could be the same. The only difference is in the measurement period. So they're going to give you 2.5 months of payroll that's how you're going to qualify for the loan. In the first application, most people were using a calendar year 2019 to determine the payroll. In this second application, it only says for the 12 months preceding the loan application. So you may have to go from April 1st of 2019 to March 31st or June 30th of 2020. So I'm just not sure on the time period. So if your payroll went up or your payroll went down, I mean, a lot of people's payroll went down in this second quarter. So if you got to plug that into the computation, then that could be knocking your loan amount down. Could be. So we have to see. We'll wait for more clarification. Yes, we are helping clients with forgiveness. If you just reach out to us, or we'll reach out to you and we'll talk.
And at this point, it's basically just see what you have,
right.
Compile your documents, see what you can expect based on the information, and if we would advise applying now or waiting.
Is there a benefit to using 8 weeks other than 24 weeks? The only benefit would be is that if you had restored all of your payroll at the 75% level in the 8-week period and you've got 100% forgiveness, then you can use the 8-week period, file your application based on that 8-week period, and then not have to restore payroll after that. That would be the only advantage. Timing for tax purposes. So if you defer applying for forgiveness to 2021, when you do expenses and get disallowed for being deductible in 2020 when they were incurred in 2021, when are they forgiven? So that's a great question. So it seems like the rule says that once you're forgiven, that money becomes income. So if that becomes income in 2021, but all the expenses were paid in 2020, then you have a disconnect, you have a problem. So you probably don't want to wait for forgiveness until 2021. You want to get it done this year. And there are time frames. So. As an independent contractor who with no employees, payroll is the main option for forgiveness. Is this max 75% or 60%? It's going to, your payroll is, you're going to be forgiven 100%. You don't have to show anything on where you spent your money if you're a sole proprietor with no employees. You get 100% forgiveness. Nothing for you to do.
If your loan amount is $20,833, which it should be,
yes,
or if you made less than $100,000 last year, your full loan amount should be forgiven.
Yeah, you'll get forgiveness. I stopped unemployment for 8 weeks covered by PPP. Can I resume my unemployment starting July 1st? Yes, I think the answer is yes. Again, I'm not an unemployment expert, but PPP is a loan, not income right now. So you could still get unemployment. If you fired someone with cause, can you still do the EZ application?
I think that you can. It's just if you use the safe harbors and maintained your FTE,
yes.
Then you should. The three things that allow you to use the EZ seems to cover pretty much everyone, which I don't think is going to actually be the case. But so yeah, you would still.
I think that applications, they're all going to change, but I think the answer is yes. How the hell does the government expect small business owners to figure out this complicated mess? Did you say for loans less than 150, they might give automatic forgiveness? Yes, I said that. Loans less than 150 will be forgiven as long as you sign an affidavit that you spent the money in the right place. It doesn't mean that the loan can't be scrutinized by the SBA, but from everything we read, they're not going to be scrutinizing loans at 150. And your first comment is the reason why they did that is because it is a mess. For sure. But yeah, anything under 150, I would think is going to be a part of this bill that comes out next week will be forgiven. I have not submitted my PPP application. When did you get my 2019 tax return completed? I am a single member LLC. That's funny.
Is that our client?
Yeah, it's on my desk. Yeah. Drake, I'm taking care of you this afternoon.
So we're not saying
you don't have any payroll. They're asking for payroll forms. You don't have any payroll, so you don't have anything to complete. All you'll have to do is submit your Schedule C from 2019. That's all the bank will need. And if you have a problem getting it through, call me. Loan forgiveness needs to be filed 10 months after the end of the loan's covered period. What is the loan covered period? 8 weeks or 24 weeks? The covered period is 8 weeks to 24 weeks, anytime in between. So if you cut your period off, you spent all your money, you figured you got 100% forgiveness and you're at week 14, you have 10 weeks from that period to get your application in. Make sure you hit the deadline, because if you don't file your application for forgiveness by the end of the year, then you can't file for forgiveness. That whole loan is going to be due and payable. That's as the rule's written right now. So you got to watch your deadlines at some period, and that period is probably going to be September and October. Everybody's going to file their forgiveness applications. If my bank made a mistake on the first round, less than it should have been, yes. Can with your 2019, can the amount go up? Yes, you can go back and fix that loan and get the additional amount. You can actually do that ahead of time, I think.
So you were able to do it if the bank had not filed Form 1502 with the SBA, but most of them did. So no one was really able to take advantage of that. But you will be able to now. So it would be a good idea to calculate what you applied for and what you should have received, and that should be what you would use to get that difference.
Yeah, and that is a part of the new legislation that's being signed. So it's not in law yet, but it is a part of what's coming out. Please clarify as to why a business might want to purchase equipment in 2021 rather than 2020. And shelter expenses received. I don't think I made the recommendation to purchase equipment in 2021. If I did, okay,
So
if we did, that was probably.
It was basically, if you meet with your accountant and you say, if I come in at this level of income, this is what I'll owe in tax. And you want to lower it by some amount, and you can either buy equipment or look and see if there's anything else you can do. When the CARES Act passed legislation that you're able to retroactively take advantage of a fix that they applied to certain improvement property, and you have that expense there to write off, you can just use that from the past and use that this year, and you don't have to invest in equipment if you're on the fence about it. And if you would want to put that next year, you can do that. If you need to shelter the income to a certain degree and you don't have that, then you would buy the equipment in 2020. But it's really important to just see where you are, see what the tax impact is, and try to see what you can do to plan for that.
All right, did you say that PPP dollars spent on payroll is taxable? So this is where the conflict comes in a little bit. The answer to that in a roundabout way is yes. The PPP loan proceeds are not taxable. However, the expenses that money was used that would normally be tax deductible are not deductible. So in the mathematics of it, it's the same. You're going to pay tax on those proceeds if you use them to pay payroll expenses. So the answer to your question is yes. The bank provided a loan forgiveness package on June 16th. Many banks have sent their packages out. Our monies were used mostly on payroll by June 30th. Should I apply now or wait? I would wait until we know what the new legislation comes out and whether they answer the 31 questions that have been asked to give us a little bit more clarity, and then look at providing the forgiveness. I think you're going to get a new application from your bank once this new information comes out. We used all of our money on payroll in 10 weeks. Do we still have to continue to pay our full-time employees for 40 hours? Also, if they have used all of their PTO and need to be quarantined, okay, two good questions. So you paid all your payroll, you spent all your PPP money in 10 weeks, and you're getting 100% forgiveness based on your knowledge of it. So you have 10 weeks from that period of time to submit your application as of that date. That's the date you can cut. Then you can do whatever you want with your employees after that, but you got to get your application in as of that date. Question number 2 reverts back to what we were saying about the paid time off plans. So if your employees are quarantined due to certain reasons, either they're sick, somebody in their family is sick, they can't get daycare, things like that, there is a program out there that the government will reimburse you for their payroll up to certain amounts. And they do that by reducing the amount of payroll taxes that you pay going forward. Please coordinate that with your payroll service, because they have all the information and they do it very well. If you don't have a payroll service and you would like to consult with one, let us know and we can recommend a few. We're a medical practice that received Medicare funds. Are these taxable? How do these funds impact PPP forgiveness? We received PPP of 60. So your PPP is forgiven in this new legislation because it's under 150,000. Question number 2.
So we're trying to put together something on all of the provider relief payments that everyone is getting. We don't think that there's any impact on one or the other, but
yeah.
The medical societies, all the state medical societies are saying that we really don't have all the information we need to answer that question. Hopefully really soon we're going to do a Medicare focused one.
Are they taxable though?
Are they taxable? What can you use it on? How does it impact your PPP forgiveness and state programs? I do not believe that they are taxable if they're used for the intended purposes, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
But again, you have to be careful because non-taxable money received to pay deductible expenses renders those expenses non-deductible. So there's a lot of legislation that has to happen in the next 30 to 60 days in order to get more clarity on the taxation of those medical practice payments. BMT sold the loans to Loan Source. They had a session last week that warned participants not to assume you will qualify for the 2 safe harbors listed in the forgiveness rules. Do you have a spreadsheet to help us figure out whether we qualify or not for the safe harbors?
It would be more of a decision tree than a spreadsheet. But yeah, if you reach out and you can direct the email to me, I could work with you on that.
How likely is it that loans under 150 will be automatically forgiven? Again, this is a legislation that's being presented as we speak. It was written yesterday, and we had hoped that it was going to be passed by today. That's why we kind of picked today to be the date. So I think that you're about 100% likelihood that those loans will be forgiven so long as you sign an affidavit that says you spent the money in the right areas. So there's going to be, from what I understand, 5 questions that you have to answer on the affidavit in order to get forgiveness, and that's all you would have to submit. So presuming things move along as we hope they are, I think you have 100% likelihood that that 150 threshold is going to be, will be realized. You may have mentioned this, so I apologize.
Sorry.
When do you recommend applying for the second round of PPP? And do you advise applying with the same financial institution? Good questions. First of all, the second round of PPP is part of the legislation that hasn't been passed yet. So I'm going to guess that by August 11th, 12th, 13th, in that area, if everything moves along like it should, by that time, there will be an application for the second round. Should you go back to the same bank? Great question. If you had a good experience with that bank, I would say yes. If you're a Bryn Mawr Trust customer, not likely, because Bryn Mawr Trust likely, and I hate to call them out, but they were mentioned, is not going to rewrite PPP loans because they're kind of out of that business. So I think that banks will be looking for new business there, because this could be another huge a lending opportunity for the banks. And the banks get fees to do these loans. It's, they're not doing it gratis yet. They get good fees. Although my banker, he loves fees, but I know he's making good fees on these things. Sorry, Matt.
All right, so that was good.
If an LLC member owner is on disability, can we get PPP money to match his guaranteed payments before he was on disability, and how will that affect disability?
Don't know that.
Yeah, but I think that your PPP money is based, well, new PPP money, maybe not. I don't know the answer to that. We're going to have to.
I think the timing of the disability would matter. If you send that to cares@brinkersimpson.com,
we'll find that answer
that
for you. That's going to be addressed. There's no exception to the 75% salary reduction in the case the business is not allowed to open. PPP was spent in 10 weeks, and now we are required to be closed.
Correct. At this point, they've never released any type of remedy or safe harbor for the salary piece, except that you do have until 12/31/20 to make that restoration.
You can restore it by the end of the year.
But still, in your position, there's potential that you'll have forgiveness reduction, and I hope that they address the salary piece, because it's confusing. No one understands it, and most people will see if they see reductions, it's going to be there.
Yep. If an employee that only worked 1 out of 3 months during the base period, do you count him or her as 1 FTE or 1/3 FTE? The report that's generated on our payroll company seems to count that person as 1 as an average for that 3-month period, which makes the base period FTE higher.
I would think it should be
Based on hours. It's based on 40 hours.
Yeah, it should be done every cycle, right, of some sort. If it's weekly, it should be done. It should be the weekly average. So if you do it that week and you have 3, it shouldn't be a full 1 for the entire 3.
Yeah, I don't think it should be a full person for that, because you can do 0.3 people and add that into your computation. So I would question the payroll company on that.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Don't assume that they are right.
Yes.
Some of their reports are really helpful for information gathering, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be pulling the right information.
Yeah, this is their first time through this as well. And a question like that might have to be answered for them to come and correct the information. So don't assume that your payroll company is doing everything correct. No, we don't want banks looking closely at your applications. Still confused about 8 weeks or 24-week period to spend the money. We got the money in the bank May 1. Do we count 8 weeks or 56 from there, which is June 25th? 56 days. Yeah. We spent all the money on payroll by then. We spent all the money and we got on payroll, but you're saying to include utilities. Okay. The 8 week or 24-week period. The 8 week period was the initial period that allowed you that required you to spend everything in 8 weeks. You were borrowing payroll based on 10 weeks. And the government was telling you to get forgiveness, you had to spend it within 8 weeks. Well, it didn't make any sense. So that's why, for weeks, everybody had been pushing the government, you got to change this 8 weeks. So they came out with a 24-week period. If you notice on the forgiveness applications, the applications were expiring on October 15th, which is actually the 24-week period. That's when the 24-week period ends. So it looked like all along they were going to address this 24-week period. All that simply does is it gives you more time to meet the criteria for forgiveness. If you've done everything in the 8-week period and you're sure that you got 100% forgiveness, then you can submit your forgiveness application and be forgiven. You can do it. I'm just saying there's no rush to do it at this point since legislation could be changing. Did I hear you correctly? If my first PPP loan was lower than it should have been, can that be fixed? Is it up to the bank to make the decision, or is that from SBA and they must correct the amount? Yes, you can fix the loan in this second round if there was a mistake made.
If that passes,
Yeah.
that hasn't passed. And they did allow for you to do that in the first round, but if the bank had not filed certain forms with the SBA, and most banks had done that by the time people realized they could apply for the difference. So hopefully in the second one, you're able to.
Yeah, you should be able to make the fix. Is it the bank or the SBA making the decision? You make your application to the bank has to go to SBA to get the money or the guarantee at this point. They don't have the money yet, they just have the guarantee. All right, I'm still confused about how to address the $8,000 EIDL grant we got when we applied for the EIDL loan. We did not pursue the loan, but we got the grant. And 77 grand from PPP. Is the 8 deducted from the 77? So we should show at least 85 in payroll and utilities. No, that's not it. So yes and no is your answer. When you go for your forgiveness, you're going to ask for forgiveness of $77,000 because whether you had $85,000 in payroll or you had $77,000 in payroll, you can only get forgiven the amount of the loan. What it looks like is going to happen is your grant money, which is already free money that you received, will be deducted from your loan forgiveness amount. So if you got a loan for 77 and you got a grant for $8,000, you're probably going to get $69,000 forgiven, no matter what you do. So 100% less the grant money. That's what will happen. We're pretty sure of that.
Yeah. We can't see you.
Oh, that's too bad.
So no one will know how often I touch my hair.
Yeah.
There's bets.
We got that. Our fiscal year ends 9/30/20. This is where we run into problems with companies that have fiscal years. We did not use all the funds in 8 weeks, but we will before 9/30. Do you recommend we apply for forgiveness prior to 9/30? Our loan was less than 150. Yes. You want to match? I think the answer is
That's
yes.
it.
Yeah. You want to match the forgiveness to the expenses for sure. So if this is the situation where it gets a little tricky, get your forgiveness done because you're under 150. Once this new legislation comes out, you're most likely going to be forgiven automatically. So once the legislation comes out and the application comes in, get it filed and get the forgiveness done. I had an employee who was quarantined several days but not working due to a possible COVID exposure. Should I use PPP money to pay her for those days? I have my PPP money in a separate account, and I'm transferring as I need it each week to cover payroll. If she's still part of your payroll, even though she's quarantined and she's being paid, you can keep her on payroll. If you elect to put her through the family leave payment, you can't use that payroll for PPP forgiveness. So that becomes your choice. Your outline says 10 months to apply forgiveness. Now you were saying 10 weeks.
I think the 10 weeks maybe was the payroll. Like you're 10 months from the date, what was the 10 months? Is the absolute deadline to apply, and then it becomes a loan. The 10 weeks, I think, is just the
You gotta have
2.5
it in.
months or 2.5 weeks.
Right, I didn't mean to say 10 weeks, I'm sorry. If I said 10 weeks, I didn't mean 10 weeks. When do we need to apply for forgiveness? We already spent all the money in 10 weeks, okay. Do you say there's a limited short time frame? I thought you were talking about applying. You have to apply by the end of the year for forgiveness. You want to apply at the end of your, if you paid all your money, if you spent all your money and you know you have forgiveness and you're 100% forgiven, after this legislation comes out, just so it doesn't change anything and it might clarify a few things, then you can apply for your forgiveness based on that end period. If I have seasonal employees currently that did not have a first round, and we did not have a first round of PPP, do you expect it to count these employees in the next round if passed?
You would be covered under so they changed something towards the end of the first program that would have allowed you to pick any period that would have maximized your loan amount as a seasonal employer. So you would be eligible for that difference.
Yes, you would have been eligible under the first round with seasonal employees. You're not eligible on the new PPP loan, but this legislation should open the door for you to go back and apply under the old loan since you failed to. I would talk to your bank immediately. If I use all my PPP money but I'm not filed for forgiveness, do I need to continue to pay all my employees for 40 hours until I apply?
This is where the FTE safe harbors can be useful. So the one downside to waiting is your FTE is going to be tested either through 12/31, you have to meet it at some point, or at the date of application for forgiveness. But if you meet some of those safe harbors, if the economics of your business does not match the reality of keeping those people, then you'll be covered under these other safe harbors. So you have to definitely consider that in waiting.
Yes. There are, in our other PPP information in the Flexibility Act, there is a provision in there that if your business fell off a certain amount, you waive all of the head count generally. If you just said your PPP forgiveness amount will be reduced by the EIDL grant, but if you got less than 150 in PPP and the legislation allows you to sign the affidavit, you get full forgiveness. How will these two things impact each other? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I am going to surmise and say that you're still not going to get forgiveness for the grant money, because then what the SBA is saying is that it's a double dip of forgivable money. So on the application for forgiveness, at the top part of the application is a section where you tell them how much grant money you received. It never works into the mathematical application for forgiveness as it's written right now. What I think the application will look like for a company that's under 150 is you still have to provide that information up top, and you're still going to provide the amount of loan that you received. And the SBA is going to do the forgiveness computation based on the amount of loan less the grant money. I think that's how it's going to work. I haven't read anywhere where it says that it'll work differently. The $150,000 threshold is really to just quicken the application process for those loans. And it really takes a burden off the banks for having to go through and scrutinize all those loans. You're still going to put amounts on there, and you're going to attest and say, I spent all the money where I was supposed to spend it. But if you got a $140,000 loan and you had an $8,000 grant, I still think you're going to get forgiveness at 132 at that point, I think.
Yeah. And then what stinks about that for lenders is they may have now an $8,000 loan, unless you want to pay that back right away. that's,
Yeah. All right. My business was only open for 10 days of 2019. My comparison period was January to February of 20. What is the date I compare against to show that payroll are back up to 75%? It's going to have to be that January to February of 2020 period. Yeah.
Well, so, no, not, so you're asking two questions with one question. For your head count, you can use, and I guess you would have to use that, yes. You probably have to use January, but that's not the 75 piece, that's the salary piece, and that's the first quarter of 2020.
To clarify,
Where'd that go?
Oh.
Sorry,
we lost a
skipped one.
couple.
No, where'd it go? Okay, maybe somebody took it
All right, there it's next. We met the 60% PPP spent on payroll, yet there are funds still remaining. If the forgiveness of all of our loans under 150 occurs, will we need to return the balance not spent? Yes, those rules haven't changed at all, but you have 24 weeks to spend your money on payroll. So if you're only spending 60% of it and you're at this period now, just wait. Carry it out over the 24 weeks so that you spend 100% on payroll if you don't have those other costs. There's no reason at this point. All of those changes were made so that you would not have to do what you're looking to do here. So spend all the money before you put your forgiveness in. That's the first criteria. Spend all the money first. I did lose one.
I don't think so, really.
Correct.
No,
Yeah, it's down at the bottom. All right.
He's still here.
If a company not only received idle grant money and took the idle loan, should the initial idle grant money be claimed on the PPP forgiveness application? Yes. So the grant money has to be shown on the forgiveness application, just the grant piece, not the idle loan piece. Those two are, they don't interact. So you can have an SBA loan through the idle program, and you can have an SBA loan through the PPP program. You just can't use them to pay the same expenses. So you want to use your PPP money to pay the payroll, to meet your criteria, and use the idle loan money to pay other operating expenses. Be very careful with that.
I think we did miss Craig, so let me look at that. He's kind of clarifying. So where is he?
There's Craig there. Yeah, okay. If my PPP loan was 70,000 and my auto grant was 4, do I get forgiveness of 66? Do I owe back the 4, or will there be interest and other fees? You'll have to pay back the 4, and you'll have to pay back the 4. There's interest if you make it a loan and you pay the 1% interest, and I don't believe there's any other fees. My recommendation at that point would be just pay back the 4 once the forgiveness piece comes back from the SBA. Just pay the $4,000 back at that point. Maximum paid in 24 weeks is $20,833.
45,163. I think whatever it's, if you get the full 24 week at $100,000 person for an employee, the 20,833 is only for owners. That's the limit there.
So you get 45,000 and some number for each employee, but only 20,833 for any owners. That's the limit for owners. Do you advise businesses apply for the hazard pay grant program, or is it going to become a public display for all those to see, just like the PPP loan disclosures? So the hazard pay grant program is a Pennsylvania program that allows you to get money for employees that are lower paid employees. And if you qualify for that program, yes, you should go qualify and get that money. That's a grant program as well. Will they publicize the companies that get that money? I would think so, yes. Just like they have listed all the companies, at least in Pennsylvania, who got PPP loans. It's all listed there. The amount of the loans within a range are listed there. The amount of jobs that you restored are listed there. They're all wrong. So that becomes public knowledge, so you can look that up.
And keep in mind the PA grant, at least I think, is you're getting reimbursed at the end.
Yes.
I didn't realize that at first, but you're going to have to front that difference in payroll, and then you'll get reimbursed at the end of the program.
I had 3 employees during PPP 8-week period. I now have 2. When do I need to add the 3rd employee to get forgiveness?
If you meet one of the safe harbors, you don't have to.
Right. So if you're out of the safe harbor, if you're in the safe harbor where that person that you let go was either fired for cause, didn't return,
You're not able to
or
rehire.
you can't rehire because of the economics, then you don't have to restore that person. I'm not finding many companies that have to restore their payrolls headcount. I'm really not. Most of them are fitting into the safe harbor and getting the forgiveness. Non-owners is 46,153 if using a 24-week period. Yes, that is correct. That's the number.
No, that may be.
Looks a little high.
It is. It's but if you're going to 15 weeks, no, it's going to be at the 15-week number. I'm almost certain I see that in an IFR. I can confirm it, but I'm pretty sure it's the number of weeks. You can't prepay somebody to the 24-week period. And you know what? Actually, I think you can, because you have to restore the salary that much. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to let you know. And I have your email address, so I'll reach out.
More than 75% of my 12 employees are after reopening are new hires. Many previous employees chose not to return. So I get excused for those who did not return as a safe harbor, or do I need to show that I am back to the same number, 12 employees and total payroll expense? More than 75% of my employees are returning. No, they're replacing the employees with new employees. They're fine.
So you'll probably meet your head count
Yes.
test. You may have some salary issues there. So you know what? Why don't you just email us some specifics on that question?
Right, that's a tough one to answer on the fly. Well, the hazard pay loan cost employers money because we have to pay taxes on it.
Yes.
Hazard pay loan or
FICA
grant?
tax. It's a grant,
Yeah,
but you have to
but
pay
it
your
is for
FICA
payroll.
taxes. Yeah,
Yes,
your payroll
yes.
taxes.
Payroll taxes, it does. Craig just doesn't move up.
I know, I don't know why. And
To clarify, do not book PPP expenses until PPP loan has been forgiven. Any benefit to reducing expenses as opposed to miscellaneous income. So you want to report your expenses normally, as you normally spend the money. So report your profit and loss statement. Report your financial statements as if the PPP money was a loan. So it becomes a liability at that point. It doesn't go into your P&L until it becomes forgiven. At the point that it becomes forgiven, the question is, should I show it as additional income or should I show it as reduced expenses? It's a good question. And my answer would be whatever benefits you the most in that, to either show it as income or reduced expenses. The income, the loan forgiven, the loan amount is not taxable. The expenses are not deductible. So in your P&L, if you're paying taxes based on gross income, then you would certainly not want to show that as gross income. You would show it as a reduction of expenses. And really the way it is presented is it's only a reduction of expenses from a tax standpoint, not from a corporate standpoint, but it should become below the line of operating income because it's not an operation. It's not an operating income amount. It should just be at the very bottom of your financial statements, but only when it's forgiven. You can project and say, I think it's going to be forgiven, so I want to put it in. But that's really only a tax consideration at this point. That's it.
yeah,
That's the
it.
reduction. Yeah. That's, any other?
I think that's it.
Okay. Good timing. 1 minute 28. Here's our email and website references one more time. Please reach out. I'm sure that there's a lot of reach out after we get done. We always go right to the emails and try to get them finished. I appreciate everybody hanging in there till the end. Enjoy the rest of the week. And once this legislation gets passed, we will have another webinar to present the legislation and make sure everybody understands the impact. So we're going to wait until then but we will notify everybody once it's passed. Please stay on our website and see it there.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks
Have a
for
great
joining.
week.
Have a great week.